And welcome to 101 here on Metro TV. I am Bright Nana Kwesi Amenin, and it's going to be a bit of a 1-on-2 because I have two guests joining me here tonight on 101. Don't go anywhere, stay with us. We return from this quick turn for a conversation. Joining me tonight here on 101 is John Kwame KAPI. He's a Principal Assistant Registrar, Head Office Management Department. Thank you so much for joining us here. Grateful to have you. And also Mgmt Dept, Deputy Registrar, Controller Art and Business Subject Department. Also joins us here this evening. And they are all coming from the West African Examinations Council. We just want to look at what exactly is happening when it comes to education and examination here in Ghana. How prepared are they even for this year's examination? And also, irregularities, how do they deal with it, and how does it even affect markings and results of people who sit for the examination here on 101 today? Stay with us. Turn it down. Let's have a conversation and a good one here. Welcome once again.
Thank you.
Let me kindly begin with you, John Kwame KAPI.
Yeah.
I don't want to mess the names around, so I'm trying to get it correct. John Kwame KAPI. I'm starting with you.
Sure.
How is WAEC faring? And how are you prepared for 2023 examinations?
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity. The West African Examinations Council is faring very well. We are working very hard. There are challenging situations, but we are also up to our task. We are working very hard, meeting our targets and, addressing the challenges that come our way. Now, there are a number of preparations that we put together before every examination starts. And as I speak, we are far advanced with everything that we need to do. The part that probably is left to be done is completion of printing of codes and then dispatching same to the various examination centers for exams to commence.
I think by this time, every student out there might be a bit panicked. I mean, knowing that you're sitting for a final year examination or final examination to push into the next sector of life or education sector is a bit worrying, sometimes scary, I should put it. By now, what should students be doing? Let me ask you that, Dubuchi.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity, and then good evening.
Yes.
For the viewers, students at this time, they should be focused, learning, revising all that they've studied, ready for the exams. They should not be looking any other way for any manna to fall from heaven. So they should learn and revise their notes.
If you say manna, do you mean to say last minute apple? Like
exactly,
how say
exactly that. That's what, with this social media period, a lot of fake questions flow over the media, and the student always hook onto that without learning or revising all that they've studied. So they should desist from all those things, waiting for something to come forward to them so that they study.
But how does WAEC also help to curtail all these things? Preparing for examinations, and you go online, Facebook and the rest, and you see a lot of questions subjectively being told that these are the questions that will be coming for the final examinations. How would your office also ensure that it's dealt with?
Thank you. We engage in sensitization program where we move from school to school to conscientize them, making them know the do's and don'ts of the exams. And we try to conscientize them to desist from looking for any other source to make them pass the examination. So we do sensitization by giving them the do's and don'ts of the exams. So that's what we do to conscientize them.
Hold on, I'll come back to it, but let me come to Mr. KAPI. Now, I know that some of your rules and regulations have been tweaked a little bit.
Yeah.
What informed that, and what are some of the new ones?
Well, usually when there are offenses and there are punishments that go with those offenses, we've had to tweak them a little because some of the penalties that come with those offenses are not punitive enough. Because I say that because if you look at the frequency, the regularity with which these offenses recur, it tells you that our candidates are simply not deterred by what we are doing. Besides, there are little windows that people easily manage to slip through, even though it is obvious that they've done something that should be punished. And so that called for the little tweaking of the rules and regulations so as to not necessarily looking for people to punish,
right,
but at least setting the parameters or setting the platform for people to write genuinely and earn the grades that they deserve.
What are some of these regulations that have been tweaked?
Well, first of all, we have the issue of foreign material. Now, foreign material, a lot of people have tried to redefine it in so many ways. But what we say is that whatever piece of paper is on you.
And forgive me, and this is like the clear definition of foreign material by WAEC.
Absolutely,
right.
Yes. So every piece of paper, plain or printed, and it doesn't matter what material you have on it, is considered foreign material. There are some that may come with plain sheets of paper. First of all, remember that there is always an intent before an action is taken. And so if somebody has a plain sheet of paper on him, the assumption is that he probably has the intention to scribble something, either take it out or pass it on to another person. Now, we also have issues of foreknowledge. You know, foreknowledge, let me explain a little bit about this. When we send our questions out there, there are what we call our examination depots. Now, from the depot, we dispatch them to the examination centers. Now, in the course of this transition, it is possible anybody can do anything. We have evidence, but we want to hold on to that because we are still investigating a number of issues. Now, so if the question papers have left our custody and they are with, let's say, examination officials who are moving from our examination depot to the examination center, then we will call that one foreknowledge, assuming that any candidate has that information before, the commencement of the examination. Now, we also have collusion. Collusion is a situation where you have candidate A and candidate B sharing information in the course of the examination.
Right.
So, for example, I write something on my question paper and pass it on to a colleague candidate, or I write on my answer booklet, pass it on. Sometimes also, like the plain sheet of paper I mentioned earlier, probably will write something on it and then send it to a colleague. So there are a number of them that we have tried to, adjust a little bit so as to be able to cover all manner of irregularities that occur at the examination centers.
I think by now I'm interested in the punishments one might end up receiving when caught involved in any of what you've spoken about.
Well, just to make a little reference, there are situations where, in case of mass cheating, all results will be withheld, investigated, and if we are very sure that indeed there was mass cheating, we cancel the entire results of the candidates.
The entire results of all the candidates?
Yes. Now, when there's also the issue of, let's say, collusion, that one also, we would withhold the results, do our investigation, and if we are very certain that indeed there was collusion, we would look at the other papers of the candidates, ensure that, or convince ourselves that something untoward has happened, and based on that, you can have your entire results cancelled. Now, these rules, let me stress, are not printed on, They are not hard rules that cannot be looked at another way. If there is enough evidence to show that maybe the candidate did independent work in the other papers, it's possible that some kind of remedial measures can be taken in terms of applying the rule.
Now, let me speak to you. How do you even determine that the entire house might have cheated or somebody might have cheated? Aside the fact that an invigilator might catch somebody red-handed, what are some of the alerts?
Yes, thank you. For determining how students mass cheated in exam hall, we normally look at the wrong answers provided by the students.
Wrong
answers because we all don't think alike. Then you all produce the same answers, which is wrong verbatim, word for word. Where there's a punctuation, there's a punctuation. Like, let's take, for example, mathematics, where there are figures. So if you make a mistake giving a wrong figure, it should be peculiar to a candidate. But if the whole hall, 200 students, repeating the same wrong figure, then there's something wrong somewhere.
Has there been an occasion where an entire classroom, while all the candidates involved in an examination?
Exactly, it happens.
What's the percentage?
Mostly for such collusion, we see about 90% in the examination hall.
90%?
Yes.
What happens to the other 10%?
10% they do independent work. You know,
It means you don't cancel the entire
no,
results
those
of
students,
the
their results will be released because we really take time to go through, scrutinize before we take a decision.
Right. And I know there are some years of ban and all that.
Yeah.
Is it still in existence? And what are the numbers?
They are still in existence. Of course, after you determine the level of irregularity, and then you think that a person has done such and such a thing that is not right, you probably can ban them for a year. Okay, we report to the appropriate authority for disciplinary action to be taken. So the ban is between a year and 3 years, depending on the magnitude of the offense.
A year and 3 years.
Yeah.
And within this time period, what do you expect of the students?
Well, you probably are asking me what happens to somebody who goes to steal in the market and is imprisoned, and we ask what they are doing in prison.
It should be of concern to you as well.
Yes.
Absolutely, it is a concern. That is why my colleague mentioned earlier that we do sensitization. We go out there and we tell them in black and white the do's and don'ts of the examination and the possible repercussions of any breach of these rules and regulations. Now, if after all of this, you still go ahead and do something untoward, and then we investigate and we find that you are guilty, we apply the rules. They are not applied arbitrarily. We look at the issues carefully, we turn them around. He mentioned scrutiny.
Right.
Scrutiny is one of the things that we do very well, critically. I mean, it is tasking because you have to go through every single script and convince a panel that I found, he mentioned, let's say, the same figure, the same wrong figure running through. I find this running through. What is the percentage? How convinced are you? You've got to convince the panel that this is wrong before action is taken.
You have to defend your
absolutely
accusations.
yes, yes.
Right. I also want to find out, you mentioned that you've been speaking to the public to ensure that they understand what exactly these examinations practices are. Now, to what extent do you think all this education has helped to curb the situation? Because almost year on year, we keep recording similar cases.
You know, our society still has thieves, despite the fact that they are caught, tried, and imprisoned. The same applies to students. And sometimes it's just about thinking that I can circumvent the thing and not get caught. We've done this, and sometimes the questions that come from the candidates tell you that in some of the previous cases, some of the things happened based on ignorance. For example, I mentioned earlier a plain sheet of paper. Somebody can come and tell me it was a plain sheet of paper, there was no print on it, so what shows? But the intent is there. And so if I come...
But how do you determine the intent? It is plain.
We have evidence to show. That is why we have come up with that rule. All right? We've had situations where candidates have had this in their pockets and they've written, information, either thrown it out for someone to pick up and work out and bring in, or they write on it and distribute or, throw it around, the examination hall. So there's evidence. We didn't just come up with these rules based on our findings in the field. We came up with these in order that we can curb. So when we go out there during the sensitization, all of these things are mentioned to them and they are told what the repercussions are if they engage in them. So this has limited a number of people from engaging in exam malpractice. But of course, there are still the recalcitrant ones who will go out there and do same.
Right. Mr. WAEC, this is quite an interesting conversation here, I might say. And I believe if students or parents are watching, you might want to caution your children, or if you're a teacher, you want to go a long way to learn and listen. It goes beyond just the examination hall and the applications if you are caught. Let's speak about how teachers also deal with some of these students. Psychologically, going in for examination, preparation, what should it be like?
Thank you. The preparation should be the key, and where students are made to not to fear exams. You know, we all fear exams in one way or the other.
Right.
But when you prepare the student and the student is ready to write paper, an exam, you should let them know that what you taught them, they will be able to do it. But if you create the impression that, okay, there will be a help somewhere coming, students don't prepare themselves well.
Do you get that information?
We get the information all along. You know, like my colleague said, in all situations, it's not everybody who thinks the same negative way. Some people are there, they're not thieves, they don't like to steal, and they're not even happy what their colleagues do as teachers. They give us information. You couldn't believe that students even pay monies. Teachers charge them to pay money to be aided in the examination hall. And some of them release this information to us. Making the student, you know, you put the student at a risk.
I mean, whether I learn or I don't learn, I'm going to be helped in the examination.
Exactly. So if it goes to that level, students don't prepare, knowing that manna will fall from somewhere for them. And these teachers sneak in. He mentioned something, foreknowledge. They sneak in the paper, solve the solution, bring it into the examination hall for students to copy. And like I told you in the mathematics, whereby maybe student write wrong figure, if the teacher who is solving the thing for the student make a mistake, the student repeat that mistake in their answer booklets. Maybe the teacher was, or the one who is solving the problem is quickly doing it, and he made a mistake.
If a teacher is fingered for doing this, what happens to him or her?
You know, we don't have in our rules to punish a teacher, but rather we prosecute the teacher.
But I believe you also make recommendations.
Yes. So when a teacher is caught, that one we bring you by the law. We prosecute you. We'll hand you over to the police for you to face the law.
And what are the repercussions of that prosecution?
Yes, you'll be fined. If you are not able to pay, you go to jail.
How many years are we looking at?
That one, we leave it to the legal.
So there's not a particular prescribed.
I don't know the particular punishment. Anyway, sometimes the magnitude of your offense will determine the punishment that you should be given. So I feel teachers should leave students alone, prepare them, and then don't promise them anything.
Right.
So that they will be able to perform.
Let's now talk about registration of candidates. And I know there are a lot of issues there as well. Let me let you answer that, and I'll come to you later.
Yes.
Let me let you speak on that. Registration of candidates. You are smiling. Take me through that.
Well, registration of candidates, you know, we have different examinations that we conduct in Ghana here. We have the Basic Education Certificate Examination, BEC, and then we also have the WAEC. Now for BEC, currently we have BEC for school candidates and BEC for private candidates. Now it's a new thing that has been introduced by the government of Ghana, that candidates who probably could not make it at BEC for one reason or another should be given a second chance. All right, so we have those who register, and the registration is supposed to be, if you read the document about the new educational reform, basic education is supposed to be for 9 years, 6-year primary, 3-year JHS, and then you write the BEC, all right? So for registration, it is after the 9-year basic education that you qualify to write BECE. Now for private, BECE private, anybody who wrote the examination and did not pass the first time, or anybody who for some reason hasn't necessarily gone through the school system but thinks that they are capable of writing. And there's an age limit. If you are below 18, it is presupposed that you are, because if you look at the age at which they get to, JHS 3, we get to know that, okay, at least, and there are some of them, of course, who are much older before they get to that level. Okay, so by that, we indicate that if you haven't done the 9 years of basic education, you don't qualify to register for BECE. Now for WAS, you are supposed to have done 3 years of senior high school education, and then you qualify to register with a school. We have public schools and we have private schools. Each of these have gone through an accreditation system so that they now are running as institutions that qualify to conduct our examinations. So these are the people who qualify to write or to register and to write the various examinations that I've mentioned earlier.
Have there been a time where some unqualified students have been registered?
Yes.
How does it even affect your entire process?
Now, we wouldn't be able to mention specifically, let's say, this is how it does. It will be based on our observation in the field. We have situations where some of the senior high schools are registering candidates who should be writing the WAS for private candidates. We say that because once the school exam is for one sitting. When you have reached the final year, you register and you write that one. Now, if for some reason you have to rewrite any of your papers, you register as a private candidate. That is what the rule says. Now, if you have written the exam already as a final year student, you didn't perform, or there's some reason for which you want to rewrite a particular subject or subjects, you register for the NOVDEC and not to the school. Now, these are the ones that we refer to as unqualified candidates. Some are also workers in the system. Some are civil servants, public servants. Some of them, I don't even think that they've been through any formal school. I'll say this. There was a time we were doing some one-on-one thing in Koforidua, and this gentleman came there, and when we got talking to him, he couldn't express himself properly. So it was quite curious. Then we got to know he was a car wash attendant. What business does he have in a school examination? Such a person, I'm not saying he doesn't qualify to write any exam, but what I'm saying is that he could have registered to write as a private candidate.
That for the NOVDEC examination?
For the NOVDEC, yeah. That's what is usually called NOVDEC. Yeah. But in our system, we call it WAS for private candidates, yeah.
That is interesting. And there have been times where, let's say if you are in SS2 and you might ask to be written, or you might ask to write NOVDEC before you even write the main examination.
Yeah.
Is that authorized?
Yes, it is. It is, because it's a private exam. And that depends, is the prerogative of the parent of the said candidate. If you are in SS2 and you choose to write WAS for private candidates, WAEC does not bar you from doing so. What we are saying is that for the WAS for school candidates, it is for bona fide candidates of a particular school. If I run a school, WAEC Senior High School, for example,
right,
it is my candidates that have gone through the system from Form 1 to Form 3 who qualify to write the WAS. Any other person coming from anywhere, or even within my school, who hasn't done the 3-year senior high school education, does not qualify to write the examination.
So that means if you are going in for the NOVDEC, it doesn't matter which school you mean or what your background is. You can actually go in and have a sit and have it written.
Absolutely.
The proper examination coming from your outfit, you have to go through all the mail.
Exactly.
Through a school and properly register and can write. Right. So I'm still here with John Kwame KAPI, Principal, Assistant Registrar, Head Office Management Department, and also Lawrence DUGBATSE, Deputy Registrar, Controller Art and Business Subject Department, and we are talking examination when it comes to the West African Examination Council. Still with us, still here on 101. We'll be back. Welcome back to 101 here. I am Bright Nanakwesi Amenin. I'm still seated here with John Kwame KAPI. He is Principal Assistant Registrar, Head Office Management Department, and also Lawrence DUGBATSE, Deputy Registrar, Controller, Arts and Business Subjects Department. And we are talking about rules, regulations for dealing with case of irregularity in the Council's examination. We are talking about the West African Examinations Council, WAEC. Welcome back, gentlemen. Now, let me come to you, Lawrence. I want you to also give me your take on unqualified students who might be registered for examination. Quickly.
Thank you. My colleague talked about going through the school system. The school system, you have to study for 3 years.
Right.
And then, we have a continuous assessment component, which is added to the normal exam mark. So if you don't go through the school system, how do you get a continuous assessment? That means the schools that registered the candidate manufactured marks, forged marks for that candidate. For instance, the candidate that he talked about who was in the car wash, the two of us were at the scene. We interrogated the guy. The guy was working at the car wash, washing bay. Now, how did they get the continuous assessment? That means the school authorities registered him, maybe money exchange hands, then they manufactured marks for the candidate for the continuous assessment.
I'm wondering the marks they might have touched me with.
And those things are the non-qualified candidates that we talked about. We are talking about those who did not go through the normal 3-year schooling to obtain that continuous assessment. So if it happens like that, you better go to the private candidate. That's why we don't add continuous assessment to your marks for for the examination processes. Yes. So that's one thing I wanted to add up to the unqualified candidates. Yes.
I know that almost every outfit here in Ghana or in Africa might have their own problems and issues.
Yes.
It could be human capital, it could be financial capital, and all that. I'll come to that. But then there's this funny thing I saw somewhere where it says there are some people that their parents even buy questions for them. Have you ever heard that before? And how do you react to that?
Yes,
is it true? Has it happened before?
No. Parents can come to the West African Exams Council and buy past questions.
Some parents come there to buy past questions.
Now, but for current questions, there's no way. I don't work at test development. I have no access to questions. I work in there. As in my ward we're writing even this year, I wouldn't bother myself going to say I'm going to look for questions. So it is not true that people walk into WAEC and buy questions for their wards for the particular examination. It's possible that they came in there to buy past questions.
But in-house staff, how do you ensure that they are not taking out questions sent by the outfit to their children and cousins and all that? How do you deal with that?
There are rules that bind every single person in there. For example, if I have a ward who is in JHS 2, I have to notify the office. Next year, my ward is writing BECE. And next year, I have to repeat that notification to inform the office that I have a ward who is going to write the examination. And based on that, if I have any assignment close to the central area where the questions are produced or where the results are processed, I'm taken off that schedule for that particular period. So even those of us who are within, we are bound by these rules. We are not given any advantage over any other person who is outside.
Right. I want us now to look at BEC examination. The misconception about grading system. I think about a week or two ago, I was at the NAT stall when you were having a lecture on what exactly it means for the grading and all that and for students. Yes, I was going to come to you. Let me come to you first.
Now, we have heard a lot about these things, and we've had to answer this question over and over again. The BEC has its own grading system, what we call the T9 grading system or Standard 9 grading system.
Standard 9.
Yes. It is a grading system that is meant to, rank students on a kind of bell-shaped, system to determine the highest and the lowest performers in a particular examination. Now, if you look at BEC, you realize that they do the same subjects throughout. I mean, apart from, let's say, Ghanaian language and then BDT.
Ghana and all that.
Yeah, BDT, where some would do home economics, some would do visual arts. But then, basically, what happens is that the notion is that these are children who are at the same level, who have studied the same thing over a period, who are being assessed. So what happens is that you lump them all together, and then you rank the grades. I mean the scores, okay? Now we grade them systematically. So for example, the first, when you put them together, let's say mathematics, we put the 550,000 candidates into one box, we rank them, okay? So the first, the highest 4% will score a grade 1. The next 7% will score a grade 2, then the next 12, the next 17, the next 20, and then we'll descend the same way as we came up, 17, 12, 7, and 4. Now, people are looking at it in terms of my ward scoring a grade 9 in a particular subject. It does not necessarily mean that your ward has failed, but your ward simply find him or herself among the lower performing candidates in that particular examination.
How hasn't a child failed if they should get grade 9?
Well,
how would you raise that particular child? You just mentioned that they form part of the lower, those who might have been graded lower. But then that is amounting to you getting about 30 or sometimes 40 and 50 and all that.
Well, you are mentioning scores, but we are mentioning grades.
Right.
Of course, yes, you could have scored 30. But then that 30 for that particular year, what the state 9 does is what I've just explained to you. It's not so much the question of telling somebody they failed, but tell you that you are within the lower performing group of your, class, or the group that we have assessed for that particular period, okay? And therefore, when it comes to placement, you probably will be told that by virtue of your performance, you are not up to level 4, further placement, and so you may have to rewrite the examination or something like that.
Interesting. You want to add, please?
For the explanation my colleague gave, is true. For the BEC, it's for selection, and no one fails. You rather get the lower mark. Okay. So we rank it on merit basis. So the 30 you mentioned can even be 1 in a particular subject, because we rank it order of merit, the highest number to the lowest number. So as a subject, you have 80 to 100 being the grade 1 in the 4% zone.
Right.
30 can also be in the highest form, which can be the 30 to be 1 in the 4% zone. So we use, it's a norm reference. We just use the order of merit, then do the cutoff point. So if you come to 9, that's the lowest mark. It's not a fail.
But it looks like every single year, the percentages or the numbers, they follow suit. Is that intentional?
It is not. That is what the state 9 grading system is. We do not compare year by year or year on year. And all that we do is for this year, we have 400,000 candidates who have written BEC.
Right.
We are going to rank them subject by subject. Mathematics, we put them all together. And then so those who score, like my colleague said, if, for example, for that year, the highest mark is 30, we start from there. So obviously it's not going to be 30.
So, no, but I think it's interesting because if the highest mark is 30, you start from there. Okay.
We give the percentages.
Okay, so let's say the highest mark is 30. What is the person getting, or the people who are on that range getting?
That's by virtue of the nature of the state 9, grading system. So I know, because we've mentioned 30, you see 30 as a very low mark. We mentioned that for explanation purposes, all right?
Right.
But usually we wouldn't have candidates scoring 30 as the highest mark. But if it happens that way, that is what you grade them on. So for that particular year, the candidates didn't perform well. So you start from 30, you draw your bell-shaped thing. You start from the 4 to the 7, the 12, the 17, the 20, and then you go down again.
Has there been a time like that?
No. No.
If not 30, a bit lower.
A bit lower. We have sometimes 65.
Right.
60 being the highest. You know, especially mathematics and then the English languages.
You can get a bit tricky
Yeah,
sometimes.
so sometimes we have the 65, 60 being the highest, and then we rank. So we just do the computation, then we form the grade.
But what do you think might have, anytime such things happen, you make recommendations, you do. Imagine if 65 is what you are getting to do the gradings and all that. What recommendation would you be given? Or it depends on the subjects?
It depends on the subject and the student performance. So for the grading is how the student perform in a particular year. The marks that they had, that's what will determine the ranking. So if we do the order of merit, if 400 students write the exam, from 400 to the last person, we put the marks together, then we start applying the percentages for the standard 9, then we give them the grade. So the last one who had a 9, we don't say fail. Our interpretation is low.
Low, not fail.
Yeah, not fail.
Right, right. Let's talk. Last 2 weeks ago when I was at the Nat Hall during your lecture, what I remember, he said was that schools cannot grade or rate their teachers by the marks their students get year on year.
Exactly.
You might be doing it wrong. Let's reiterate that and tell viewers or students or head of schools why they can't do that.
Well, if I were a teacher in school A and I taught my students to go into an examination, for example, they go there and the highest person scores maybe 50% or 80%. What happens is that my students are added to other students across the country, all right? And so when the results come to my school and my best candidate scores maybe a 5, it does not necessarily mean that I've not done a good job. It doesn't also mean that I'm the best teacher because of the nature of the grading. Because we have put everybody together. If it were just my school, all right, then I'm going to put my 40 or 50 students together and rate them. And then we'll take a look at the high mark and the low mark and say, oh, how come that your highest candidate is scoring 40%? Based on that, we can assess the individual teacher, the individual teacher's performance.
Right.
But when we are putting them together with other students across the country, then we cannot go assessing individual teachers' performances.
But why don't you do that? Sorry to cut you, but why don't you rate or grade people per the schools or rather than slam them together? Why do you do that?
Well, he mentioned earlier that it's a selection test. The state 9 is basically meant for selection. All right, so by your performance for that particular year, do you qualify to be selected for this or that program at the next stage of your education? That is what it is. So we cannot limit it to schools. We cannot limit it to schools because we want to get who qualifies to go where. And the standard grading system is about the most appropriate for this particular selection exercise. Now, remember also that maybe, you may not know, but the BEC is an examination conducted by the WAEC on behalf of the government of Ghana.
Right.
All right. So if there are recommendations, we simply pass them on to the government, the appropriate institution of the government, and they probably at their sitting or in consultation with other well-known individuals in the area could make recommendations. Like, henceforth, adapt this grading system and not that grading system. And if the forum that you are referring to, you remember that the speaker said several committees have made recommendations to the government, but we on our own cannot unilaterally say that we are going to change from the State 9 to any other grading system.
So until government approves your recommendations, it remains the same.
Yeah.
Right. Let's not talk about some of your challenges. I believe this is the first challenge. The fact that until government reacts, it remains the same. Are there any other challenges aside interference from government and all that?
No, as for government interference, I wouldn't even call it interference per se, because it's supposed to be a collaboration between us and the government. So they provide for us the platforms that we need to be able to conduct our examinations. So basically, the major challenges we have as we speak, as far as the conduct of examination is concerned, is at the examination centers, as you mentioned earlier, the level of malpractice and then the involvement of teachers. I think when he spoke, he said some of them, those that we find culpable, we let the law take its course. We also report them to the Ghana Education Service to indicate that these personnel of yours in the field have misconducted themselves this way or that way. And if there are sanctions that the Education Service would apply, that is their prerogative. We cannot go beyond that, like my colleague said earlier.
But is WAEC okay? Let's talk about some of the challenges. Funding, human capital, are you okay?
Well, in terms of human capital, we are short by well over 200 personnel.
Over 200 personnel.
Yes.
That is huge.
I do not have the figure off head, but we are somewhere there. In terms of funding, it's another big challenge. It's a big national cake that they have to share across. So we wait until we are told, come and take your share, and then we'll go and pick up our share. However small it is, you have to manage it.
But until then, financially, how do you manage?
We used to, until the advent of free senior high school, candidates paid their examination fees, so we didn't really need to go to the government and ask for money to run examinations. Once the candidates paid their examination fees, that was used in running the exam. But now it is free SHS, and so the candidates do not pay the exam fee anymore. It is the government that's supposed to take care of that. So we present our expenditure to the government. Okay, our authorities go to Parliament and defend our budget, and then the government is supposed to provide the money for us to run the examination. So yes, they provide the money, but its adequacy or otherwise is not for me to tell on this forum.
I want to know, because if it doesn't happen, then it also affects your dealings, right?
Exactly.
So if the money is inadequate, how are you able to support yourself? Because like you mentioned earlier, you were paying the money
students
for examinations.
pay.
Now it's not more like that because of free SHS. The government is supposed to pay, and it's not as effective as it may seem to be.
Then we are in trouble, and it retard our progress in the examination processes. We had the same challenge last when the BEC was marked.
Right.
Because the monies were not released early, we couldn't pay the examiners on time. And they made a lot of noise. Some even wanted to do picketing at our end.
Yes.
But finally, government had to release some funds for us to pay them. So it affects our operations. So we will pray government is proactive, because it's a system when you start, you cannot halt. It must continue. So they should do well to provide the financial resources so that as we start, we continue. Well, and then end it well.
Yes. That's an appeal at least.
Yes.
That's an appeal at least. Let's take about some feel-good factor. I mean, I know about your distinction awards coming up for Washington. That made him smile. That made him smile. Let's talk about that. Preparations, who qualifies and who will be awarded and all that. Take me through them all of it, please.
So preparations are far advanced for the distinction awards for this year, to be held on the 22nd of June.
Yes,
just this month.
Just this month, yes. And it is for candidates who have performed creditably. I mean, you should score about You should be able to score 8 straight A's.
8 straight A's.
Yes.
Ooh,
that is what it is. And you should not have been engaged in any form of examination malpractice.
So that coming.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we cannot have people use shortcuts to get this kind of award. It is actually funded by the WAEC Endowment Fund that we are very gracious. They've been very gracious enough to, fund this particular, So you score straight A's, 8 straight A's, then you should not have engaged in exam malpractice. So there are other, I wouldn't want to bore you with plenty statistics.
It's
but
okay.
We have a way, of course, you may have a lot of straight A's, and so we go in for the raw scores, and then our statisticians will sit down and do some gymnastics with the figures. Not as if to say we are putting somebody aside, but trying to make sure that everybody, whoever deserves the award is the one who is, awarded.
What are they getting? Is it money? Because I love money. So is it money? Is it money?
Yes, there are monetary rewards. Some institutions have offered scholarships to some of the best candidates.
Right.
I know there are some of them who are studying in foreign universities as we speak. And then also the schools get to be recognized. Okay, so we've had times St. Louis, St. James in Sunyani,
yeah.
We've had Achimota. So we have the general one where the overall best, and then we also have the what do you call them? Disciplines, okay, general arts, general science, we have visual arts and so on and so forth. So in all these categories, we also have, awards for the candidates.
Right.
Yeah.
Or anybody who actually wins any of this, congratulations to you in advance. Anything more to add up, please?
It's a system which we try to encourage students to learn, and it's a pride. You see parents climbing the stage with their awards to receive awards that are given to their kids. It's amazing. If you witness it, you will feel like being one of them.
One of them.
So we encourage students to try and learn and do away with examination malpractices so that they will also be part of the Excellence Award.
Right.
So that's what I can encourage them to do.
Great. When he mentioned parents and how excited they get when they see their children, I remember when I was graduating from the university, my mother, she was waving her.
Yes.
I'm like, yes. That is so fresh on my mind. Every time I see her, it reminds me of that. Thank you so much for coming, please. Thank you so much. And so I've been here with John Kwame KAPI. He is Principal Assistant Registrar to Head Office Management Department. Thank you so much. And also Lawrence DUGBATSE, Deputy Registrar, Controller, Arts and Business Subject Department as well, all from WAEC. And we're talking about rules, regulations for dealing with cases of irregularity in the council's examinations, and also what exactly the exams might be looking at come this year. Don't panic, just learn and don't rely on external factors to mess your mind up. Just learn and go there confident, and sure you do well. And so I've been here talking to officials of WAEC, West African Examination Council. I'm Bright, and this is 101 here on Metro TV. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good night and bye.